Picking up on chapter 25. Molly had guessed correctly. There was a giant grizzly bear at the beehive enjoying his main meal of the day, a honey-coated honeycomb dripping with honey. Swerve left, Molly shouted. We need to hide behind that stump. The fur is about to fly. Ours, yelped the dog. Nope, said Molly as she leapt off his back, but that mountain lion is about to meet his match, this sworn enemy. Molly and Oscar ducked down. The mountain lion raced into the clearing. The bear roared. The mountain lion slammed on his brakes and growled defensively. You're a bear, it snarled. Are you talking to me, said the bear. Are you talking to me? So sorry, said the mountain lion, sounding way too civilized for a wild beast. Forgive the intrusion. Are you still talking to me, said the bear, The bear tossed its beehive aside. It stood up on its hind legs and, towering over the mountain lion, licked the honey dribbling off its claws. Very nice meeting you, bear, said the mountain lion. Must skedaddle. He took off running. Oh, you can run, the bear thundered, but you cannot hide. Molly and Oscar gave the two wild creatures time to chase each other out of the valley. When they were both sure the two ferocious beasts were gone, they came out of the hiding spot behind the stump. You are a very clever cat, said Oscar. You knew that bee was heading to its hive, and there would be a bear there too. Molly shrugged. I had a hunch. The dog wagged his tail. You're happy, right? How'd you guess? Never mind, we need to keep moving. Okay, and Dog? Yeah, thanks for the ride on your back. You were correct. We cats are not made for long-distance running. But you're excellent at being sneaky, also pouncing. True, and you're very good in a marathon. But you also knew that bears don't like mountain lions. I didn't know that. Stick with me, Oscar, said Molly. I know stuff, especially about sworn enemies. You mean like us? Precisely. The dog tilted his head sideways. You ever wonder why that is? Why, what is? Why do cats hate dogs? Molly shrugged. I guess for the same reason dogs hate cats. Now Oscar shrugged. We just do, I guess. We always have, and we probably always will. More of that instinct stuff. Molly nodded. It's just the way of the world. Come on. We need to keep moving. That mountain isn't going to walk to us. Nope, said Oscar. You want to ride on my back? No, that's okay. I insist, said Oscar, and this time, could you give me a good scratch behind the ears? Maybe a little shoulder rub? No, Oscar, I'm not going to be your personal masseuse. Come on, I can't reach those spots. Nope, not gonna happen. Pretty please with tuna on top? Nope. Happily bickering, Molly and Oscar headed off, hoping they'd reach the mountain, shaped like a hooked nose before sunset, or before they bumped into another wild predator, more interested in cats and dogs than honey and mountain lions. Chapter 26. Oscar's family was back home, and Dog Slovenia huddled around their television set watching gripping news stories on TV. The dog's name is Oscar, the ferret reported and said into the camera. He has been missing now for 2 days, lost in the woods, battling the elements, frightened by every sound he hears, every shadow he sees, his tail no doubt permanently tucked between his legs. The screen filled with Oscar's most recent class picture, the one where his eyes were closed and his tongue was hanging out of his mouth. That's my boy, said his father. Oh, Duke, whined his mother, will we ever see that sweet, sweet smile again? Sure we will, Lola, said Duke. We'll get the picture back. I just loaned it to the ferret so she could show it on TV. That's not what I meant, Duke. Duke, blubbered Oscar's mother. What if Oscar never comes home? Oh, don't give yourself kennel cough, Lola. That freaky hawk owl promised she'd find our boy. Plus, they have those crocodile lions and grizzly wolves. Can I have his toys, said Fifi. What? While Oscar is missing or lost or whatever, can I have his toys? Most of his still have their squeakers. When Fifi said that, Oscar's mother howled so loudly all the neighbors heard it and immediately joined in. Now look what you've done, Fifi, said Duke. You made your mother so sad she started a howl fest. This could go on all night. Fifi rolled her eyes. They usually do. May I please be excused? I want to go curl up in a ball and take a nap. But they're talking about your brother on TV, sniffled her mother. I know. That's why I need to take a nap. Boring. You stay right here, young lady, and grrr. Duke's attention snapped back to the TV screen. So did Fifi and Lola's. Now the ferret was interviewing that snooty cat family, the one with the missing daughter. I'm here with Boomer Histleton, the third, Esquire, and the reporter. You're the father of the missing cat Molly, is that correct? Indeed. How do you feel about your daughter being lost in the woods with her sworn enemy, a dog? How do you think I feel? Horrible, ghastly, sickened. Oh, the horror. Lost in the forest while a fiendish mutt is on the prowl. It's unimaginably horrific. That snooty cat makes me want to chase my tail until I can't catch it, said Duke. I hope Oscar chases that stupid cat up a tree, said Fifi. I agree, said Lola. It's the cat's fault that our Oscar is missing. How's that work, Mom? Asked Fifi. Simple, the cat did it first. She was missing before Oscar. Duke arched an eyebrow. Lola, he snarled, did you just call our son a copycat? Oh dear, I did, didn't I? I'm so sorry. She tilted back her head and howled. Once again, the whole neighborhood joined in. Chapter 27. It was after dark, which meant that Molly was wide awake. Cats are nocturnal creatures. They do their best work after the sun has set. That's why the cat shops and grocery stores stay open until 6 a.m. Most bargain hunting and food gathering in Cattsburg take place well after midnight. Oscar the dog, on the other hand, was starting to yawn. Maybe we should think about setting up camp for the night, he said. Let's keep going, said Molly. But we can't even see the mountain anymore. Sure we can. It's that dark lump next to that darker lump under the twinkling star. Which twinkling star? Said Oscar, sounding exasperated. There's a billion of them. Look, Dog, said Molly. I'm a cat. I do my best work at night. Night is when you're supposed to sleep, said Oscar. Only if you're a dog, which I am. Tell me something. I couldn't really smell. While they argued, they came to a road lined with cornstalks. As they squabbled, their voices grew louder and louder. Before long, they were barking and catcalling at each other. Big mistake. Get off my land, shouted a cranky voice in the darkness. This is my farm, you varmints. We're not on your farm, shouted Oscar. We're just lost. Get. Look, said Molly. It's like Oscar said. We're not on your farm. We're on a road. It's my road, answered the voice. And this here... Molly heard something go click. This is my shotgun. I ain't afraid to use it neither. Now vamoose. I'm not a moose, hollered Oscar. I'm a dog, and I'm a cat, added Molly. We're lost, they shouted together. And hungry, said Oscar. And cold, said Molly. And we were chased by a mountain lion this morning, said Oscar. And then we hiked 20 miles. Frankly, sighed Molly, we're miserable and scared. They heard footsteps. A row of cornstalks swayed open like a curtain to reveal one of the strangest creatures Molly had ever seen. She was a dog cat. Is it possible to have a nightmare while you're still awake? Said Oscar. Yeah, said Molly, looking at the creature coming out. Chapter 28. Oscar couldn't stop gawping at the dog cat. His mouth hung open, stringy drool dribbled out. What you gawking at, young'un? Said the dog cat, sounding like somebody's grumpy grandmother who doesn't like it when you pee on her sofa. Sorry, said Oscar. Didn't mean to be rude. It's just that I've never seen a creature that was half cat and half dog. Me neither, added Molly, not even in a monster movie. The granny grinned. We are rare indeed, even here in this magical park. Reckon there's only half a dozen of us left. Oscar and Molly just nodded. They didn't want the old dog cat to know how much she was creeping them out. You say you're lost? Oscar and Molly nodded some more. They also tried to smile. And hungry. They nodded one more time. They did not, however, move any closer to the weird creature from the cornfield. She walked on her two legs, but she wasn't wearing clothes, which meant she was wild. But usually wild meant really mean and hoping to eat you like the mountain lion. Why was she being nice? Well, come along then, she said. You two can spend the night in my cabin. I'll fix you something to eat. Eat? Oscar gulped. What if the freaky freak also was part mountain lion? Don't worry, Dog, the old creature laughed as if she could read Oscar's mind. I ain't gonna eat you or your cat friend. How could I? Why would I? Remind me of my great-great-grandparents, you do. And we're not really friends, mumbled Oscar. We're just calling a temporary truce, added Molly. Friendship's not really in the cards for us. We're sworn enemies. More the shame, sighed the elderly dog cat. I wish I could get you home myself, but these bones are too old for the journey. Just keep your noses pointed to the Crooked Nose Mountain. Come on, shake a tail feather. I've got supper on the stove. I like to eat late at night. Reckon it's the cat in me. She led them down the road to her cabin. Oscar could smell the odors of something foul wafting on the breeze. I didn't know how wild animals lived in houses, Molly said. I reckon there's a lot of you civilized folk that don't know much about us wild ones, said the dog cat. Here now, I fixed up a fish stew. Oscar whimpered. Don't worry, said the dog cat. It's catfish. Oscar wagged his tail slightly. Catfish might be okay, especially if you're starving. They sat down for supper and buried their faces in their bowls. Oscar loved the stew. This fish is delicious, he said, his tail thumping against a leg on the stool. An old family recipe, said the granny. So what are your names? I'm Oscar. I'm Molly. You two can call me Granny, said the wrinkled dog cat. Most everybody in these parts does. How'd you, become you? Asked Oscar. Well, according to my parents, who heard the stories from their parents, my great great grandfather and great great grandmother were a dog and a cat, just like you two. They got lost in the wilderness, just like you two. They had a lot of close scrapes and angry words, but eventually they realized that the only way for the two of them to survive out here on the far edge of the civilization was to work together. Just like the hawk owl, said Molly. Who? Said Granny. She's the head ranger down at the Western Frontier Park, explained Oscar. She's weird too, just like you. Granny smiled. I like you, Oscar. You say what's on your mind without giving it a second thought. He's a dog, said Molly. They're not big on thoughts, first or second ones. If you ask me, said Oscar, you combo creatures are super cool. Hawk owls, dog cats, I bet you can run great distances and be sneaky at the same time. Granny chuckled. Yes, I could, when I was younger anyways. It's like you have superpowers, just like superheroes in comic books. The wise old dog cat shook her head. Not all of us, Oscar. Some combo creatures, as you call them, are super evil super villains. Oscar gulped again. Which ones? Beware of the weasel boars. Chapter 29. Molly was hanging on to the wise old woman's word. The weasel boars, as you might have reckoned, she said, are half weasel, half boar. They're boring, said Oscar. A boar, explained Molly, is a wild pig with curling tusks, very ferocious. And these weasel boars, said Granny, even though they're combo creatures, they stayed wild. They're the most dangerous beasts in the park. You know, living out here in the woods like I do, I'm a big fan of animals getting along, helping each other, becoming something more together than they could apart. Your hawk owl, your moose horse, in most cases, they're better together. But the weasel boar, they're worse. How come? Asked Oscar. What do you children know about weasels? They run a very popular TV network, said Molly. That's in your civilization, said Granny. Out here, weasels are non-stop killing machines. They're cunning predators who hunt all day and all night. They can climb, swim, run. Since their bodies are also so long and skinny, they can raid underground burrows, follow rodents into hidey holes, wrap themselves around larger prey to hold them while they bite them. Weasels kill more than they eat. They hang on for extra long, storing it for leftovers, just in case they get hungry for an in-between meal snack. Now Molly gulped in the way Oscar had been gulping. And the wild boars? Granny clucked her tongue. They're big, mean, and nasty. The king of pests. When they attack, they don't stop until their target is plumb dead. Put the two together, what do you got? A nightmare, said Molly. Granny nodded. Also available in broad daylight. Molly and Oscar pushed away their fish stew bowls. Neither one of them was in the mood for seconds. I reckon you two must be exhausted, said Granny, creaking up from the table. You can bunk down in the loft. I'll pack you some food in the morning. You can be on your merry way. Yeah, right, thought Molly, as if that would even be possible with vision of weasel boars dancing in their heads. But the ancient dog cat was correct. Molly and Oscar were pooped. The warm food in their bellies had made them both even drowsier. They climbed up a ladder into the sleeping loft. Tomorrow, said Oscar, I'll help you climb back down. And this time I promise I'll catch you, even if you ride down on my back. Thanks, Oscar, I appreciate that. Good night. Good night, Molly. Sleep tight. Don't let the weasel boars bite. Can y'all even imagine what that looks like? Chapter 30. Oscar was awake at dawn. Molly slept for 5 extra hours. Typical cat, but Oscar waited for her, and then he helped her climb backward down the ladder. You can do it, he coached. Just put one paw behind the other. After Molly very slowly climbed down 3 rungs, she jumped. This time Oscar caught her. Granny fed them both a hearty breakfast of kibble mush. While they gobbled it down, she put packets of food and biscuits into a bright red bandana lying flat on the kitchen table. You're still a long way from Crooked Nose Mountain. Are you too sure you don't want to stay here where it's safe a little spell longer? Thank you for the offer, Granny, said Oscar, but I miss my family. When dogs worry, we whimper. I don't want my mother to whimper. When cats worry, they lose fur, said Molly. I don't want my mother to go bald. Very well then, said Granny, tying the bandana up into a bundle and knotting it onto a safe, long broom handle. Be safe and always remember, no matter what your math teacher may say, 1 plus 1 sometimes equals more than 2. You're always stronger together when we work together. Granny took Oscar and Molly's paws into hers, bowed her head, and prayed. Oscar prayed too. Mostly he prayed that all the weasel boars had taken the week off. Refreshed with their stomachs full, Oscar and Molly thanked Granny and set off for Crooked Nose Mountain and hopefully the Western Frontier Park, where they would be reunited with their families. About an hour after they'd left Granny's farm and were once again deep in the forest, swatting gnats and flies and mosquitoes with their tails, Oscar had a thought. Hey, Molly. Yeah, Oscar? Do you think that if we worked together we might turn into some kind of incredibly awesome creature with superpowers? Maybe, but I don't want a dog head. I need my blue eyes for all the movies I'm going to act in. Yeah, I wouldn't want a cat butt. It'd smell funny. They kept hiking in silence, each one thinking about what the old dog cat had said about sticking together, but that silence was soon interrupted by the roar of the raging rapids. There was a fast river between them and the mountain. We need to turn back, cried Molly, because cats are terrified of water. But the park is near the mountain. I can't swim, said Molly. I can, said Oscar. I can doggy paddle. Oh, great. You're going to abandon me? I didn't say that. He handed her the pole with the food bundle. You carry this. I'll carry you. What? You can climb on my back again, and I'll swim us both safely to the other side. Molly grinned. Still trying to get your back scratched, huh? Oscar laughed. Yeah, and behind my ears, too. Come on, Katt. We need to swim together, or we'll probably drown alone. Molly clambered onto Oscar's back. Oscar waded into the rippling stream. Ready? Yeah, but try not to splash me too much. They both took a long, deep breath. The current was very swift. Oscar had to paddle extra hard to avoid being washed downstream, with all the tree branches rushing by, sweeping along by the whitewater rapids. Finally, Oscar, fighting with fatigue in his leg muscles, that made it to the far shore. Oscar lumbered up the slippery rock to safety, then panting hard, he collapsed in an exhausted heap. Look what I grabbed us for supper, said Molly. Another catfish. Yum, said Oscar, standing up and shaking his body to dry off. He accidentally spritzed Molly with a shower of sprinkles. Oops, sorry, my bad. It's okay, we made it across the river, and you caught us a fresh fish for dinner. We are better together. Oh, yes, we are. They both laughed and high-fived each other. They were so happy, so caught up in their new team's victory, they didn't see the creature slinking through the trees toward them. What do we think it is? Chapter 31. I'll gather some wood to make a cooking fire, said Oscar. Dogs are great at hauling branches and twigs. I have a friend, he's a Labrador, and he drags half a tree around with him wherever he goes. I have friends who do the same with mice, said Molly. You bid the fire, I clean the catfish, together we'll feast. Oscar wagged his tail. We make an awesome team, don't we, Katt? We have our moment, said Molly. Oscar scampered off to the nearest tree. He was nosing around, looking for the perfect pieces of wood for his campfire when he smelled something absolutely disgusting, like poop mixed with wet fur mixed with rancid oil. His ears stood up when he heard a low, throaty rumble. The hackles of his back shot out. He backed 2 paces away from the tree. What's wrong? Asked Molly. I'm not sure, said Oscar, but I've never smelled anything so foul and disgusting, revolting, or gross. Well, that's not a very polite thing to say, said a deep, grumbling voice. Something stepped out of the thick underbrush near the tree. A weasel boar. Gathering firewood, it asked. Gristly slobber hung off its tusks like a double strand of snot. Were you getting ready to eat? Oscar backed up quickly and huddled with Molly. Speaking of eating things, squeezed a second weasel boar as it slipped out of the shrubbery. What's for dinner tonight? I think it's those two, said a third. With an appetizer of catfish, said a fourth, popping out of the shadows on the right. And whatever's tied up in that red bandana. Molly and Oscar were completely surrounded. What's in the food bundle? Asked the first weasel boar, licking its slimy tusks with a slippery tongue. Nothing, said Oscar, trying his best to protect the food Granny had given them. It's food, said Molly. Delicious homemade food. You can have it. Psst, whispered Oscar out of the side of his snout. We need that, Molly, for our hike up the mountain. We also need to be alive, Molly whispered back. True, said Oscar. Good point. Oscar turned to the leader of the weasel boar pack. Enjoy, fellas. Our food is your food. We know, said the leader of the pack. All 4 snarling beasts pounced on the fish and plump bandana. When they were finished, there was nothing left but a few tattered shreds of checkered red cloth and a couple snapped in half fish bones. The weasel boars belched. Not bad for fish, said the leader, but we prefer red meat, the kind you find inside cats and dogs. Chapter 32. Oscar looked at Molly. Molly looked at Oscar. Run, they both shouted. They took off like a double bolt of terrified lightning. Oscar saw Molly zigzagging to the left. He sprinted to the right, bobbing and weaving, juking and jiving. His coach would have been so proud. The weasel boars formed a pack and took off after Molly. They undoubtedly knew she couldn't run as fast as Oscar over long distances, but since they weren't chasing Oscar, he could escape. He had a clear path to freedom. Molly would probably die, but Oscar would definitely live. Wow, thought Oscar as he bounded away. Who'd ever have thought a cat would die for me? Of course, it wasn't exactly a choice Molly was making, but still, it was very noble of her. Then Oscar thought about how she called them a catfish, how she'd scratched behind his ears while crossing the rapids, how she didn't mind when she shook off all that water and splashed her, even though cats hate water. Finally, he remembered what the wise old dog cat had told them. Sometimes 1 + 1 equals more than 2. Oscar had to admit that Molly had made a great team, even though she was a cat. Two can play at this game, he said aloud. I can be noble, too. He slammed on the brakes, did a 180 around the tree, and ran after the 4 weasel boars who were chasing after Molly like a 6-legged bulldozer. Out of my way, fatso, he shouted. Then he sprang up and over a quivering wall and stinky weasel boar butts because he was a part of a Springer Spaniel on his father's side. He landed 6 inches in front of the tusk and kicked his motor into high gear. He could see Molly up ahead. She was still zigging and zagging, but she was also slowing down and breathing hard. Good at sprints, thought Oscar. Long distances, not so much. He dug deep, found a little extra oomph, and picked up his pace. In a flash, he was running alongside Molly. Hop on, he shouted. This time she didn't hesitate. She leapt onto his back. Thanks, she gasped as she clasped his collar with her claws. I think I can outrun those 4 bozos, said Oscar. They're fast, but they're also kind of fat, out of shape. I'll just leave them on my mare. Oscar didn't get to finish his thought, because all of a sudden he and Molly were caught in a tangle of ropes that was whooshing them up, up, up into a crown of leafy tree. It's a trap, said Molly. But they're wild animals, whined Oscar. How did they weave a net? We studied with them some very clever spittles, said the leader of the weasel boars, looking up at the trapped cat and dog while licking their chops. It's one of our special skills, said the nastiest looking weasel in the bunch. We use our tusks like knitting needles. Combo critters, thought Oscar, remembering what Granny had told them about the hybrid creatures with the amazing abilities. Some are super evil super villains, and some were about to eat Oscar and Molly for dinner. Chapter 33. Molly was expecting the dirty and disgusting weasel boars to gobble them up right away, but they didn't. It's not every day that we trap meat as sweet and tender as you two, said the leader of the beast as he dragged the net back to the den. The king will wish to join us for this particular feast. The other weasel boars snorted in agreement. While Molly was doing her best to act like she wasn't afraid, she was channeling every heroine from every movie she'd ever seen. She shot the weasel boars a bold and angry look of defiance. Of course, she was being dragged along a bumpy trail on her butt, and she wasn't sure she was totally selling the whole "you don't scare me" thing. Put them in the den, shouted the leader of the pack when they came into a muddy clearing under some twisted and knotty trees. 2 weasel boars slashed open the rope net with their tusks. 2 others nudged Molly and Oscar into a burrow beneath the shallow rot of a tree. It's nice and cool down in the hole, chortled the leader. Just like a refrigerator, it'll keep you chilled and fresh until the king arrives tomorrow. Molly and Oscar tumbled underground into a cold and damp hole. The weasel boars shoved a boulder across the entrance of the den to seal off the only exit. Molly and Oscar were trapped in the dark. I guess we're prisoners now, said Oscar. No, said Molly. I think we're still dinner. I'm sorry I ran right into their trap, said Oscar. You ran back to rescue me, said Molly. It was like something a brother would do. If you know my brother wasn't so easily distracted by bright, shiny objects, so do you have any siblings? Just one, a sister. Her name is Fifi. She's kind of a pampered pooch. I wonder if she even misses me. She probably already stole all my toys out of my room. My brother Blade has the attention span of a flea. His favorite hobby is to chase reflections on the wall or the floor. Sometimes I drive him crazy with my fanciest collar. How? It has rhinestones on it, so I sit in the sun and bounce little light sparkles all over the place. He can never decide which one to chase first. Drives him bananas. I like to bury my sister's hair bows in the backyard. That makes her nutso. Molly sighed. Then Oscar sighed. I miss Blade, said Molly. Yeah, said Oscar. I miss Fifi, too. Too bad we'll never see them again. The dog sprang up, fully alert. Even in the darkness of the den, Molly could see a determined glint in his eyes. Unless, he said. Unless what? Thinking about burying my sister's hair bows reminded me of something. What? Oscar wagged his tail proudly. Not to brag, but I'm a very, very, very good digger. Chapter 34. Oscar sniffed the walls of the underground den. Dirt, he muttered. He moved his nose to the left, took in a deep snort through the nostrils. More dirt. He sniffed his nose 30 degrees to the right. Dirt, 40 degrees, dirt. He sniffed harder, and weeds. More specifically, dandelions. Judging by the lag time between the dirt scent and the first hint of something wet, mustardy and green, this wall is only 6 inches thick. I can dig through that in a heartbeat. Stand back, Katt. The mud clods are about to fly. Oscar went to work on the clay wall. Clumps of muck and pebbles and shredded tree roots were sailing. Oof, he heard Molly exclaim behind him when a chunk of something must have hit her. Sorry, he said. Don't be sorry. Just dig us out of here. I'm too young and talented and beautiful to be dinner for a weasel boar. Finally, Oscar saw a pinprick of sunlight. A few more paw loads of dirt and sunlight was streaming into the underground bureau. Just need to make the hole a little wider, Oscar murmured as he kept digging as hard and as fast as he could. That hole's big enough for me to squeeze through, said Molly. We both have to be able to climb out, said Oscar. Then keep digging. Finally, Oscar scooped out a hole wide enough for him to climb out of, too. I'll go first. If there's a guard, I'll growl and snarl at him. You climb up after me and jump on my back. We're going to need to run another marathon. Got it, said Molly. And Oscar? Yeah, Molly. Kinda, sorta, thanks. You're welcome, kinda, sorta. You ready? Ready. On 3. 1, 2. Do we go on 3 or after 3? After 3 would be 4. So we go on 3. I do. You follow right after. So I'm actually going on 4. Fine, said Oscar. I'm not good at math. 1, 2, 3. Oscar scurried out of the hole. He spun around. There was only one easel boar standing guard at the entrance of the den, and he was lying on the rocks and taking a nap. Hee-haw, he shouted to Molly, shooting out of the tunnel like a furry cannonball. She used Oscar's head like a gymnast would a pommel. Horace did a flip, a mid-air sideways twist, landed on his back, saddled up his shoulders, and was ready to ride. Giddy up! Unfortunately, all her excited shouting woke up the sneezing weasel boar. Hang on, shouted Oscar. He started running through the forest. The startled weasel boar guard quickly realized what was going on. The king's feast was escaping. Snorting wildly, it took off after Oscar and Molly, who kept looking over her shoulder, giving a play-by-play commentary. The weasel boar is in hot pursuit. He stumbled over our exit hole. That's good. Uh-oh, he looks really, really mad. That's bad. The trees thinned out. Oscar saw a cliff up ahead, a rocky precipice. And there was nothing on the other side but sky and clouds. Chapter 35. Molly felt the dog slam on his brakes as they raced dangerously close to the edge of the cliff. We're trapped, she cried out dramatically. Again! The ground shook. She could hear the rampaging weasel boar's heavy hooves pounding into the dirt as it chased after them. Molly climbed off the dog's back. Stay behind me, said Oscar, shielding her body with his. The dumb dog started inching backward, moving closer to the cliff. I want to be right on the edge. What? Why? Just let me know when you get there. I can't turn around. I have to keep my eyes on the weasel boar. Oscar, why would anybody want to stand on the edge of the cliff? It's sheer drop. How far? Molly held her breath and dared to peek down into the ravine. 300 feet at least. Perfect, said the dog. Hang on, here it comes. Are you demented? It's going to knock us off. No, it's not. Oscar crouched into a defensive stance, protecting Molly, who peeked between his legs and saw the weasel boar lower its head. With its head down and curled tusks pointed straight at Oscar, the ferocious beast charged forward. Oscar just stood there defending Molly. When the beast was maybe 6 inches away and Molly could smell the hot breath streaming from his flared snout, Oscar finally leaned sharply to his right. Molly leaned with him. The giant weasel boar became a blur. Molly heard something sharp slice across Oscar's fur, but he didn't wince in pain. Instead, he wagged his tail because he was happily watching the weasel boar's momentum carry it over the cliff. The thud came 10 seconds later. It was a very, very long drop. You saved us, shouted Monty. Woohoo! You are the bravest dog I've ever met. Thanks, wheezed Oscar. Then Molly saw a bright red gash slice across his side. It was oozing blood. The charging weasel boar's razor-sharp tusk had slashed him. You're hurt, said Molly. Nah, it's just a scratch. The thing is, it was going to gore you, to stab you with its tusks. True, but I'm nimble. It missed. Whew. Oscar stumbled slightly. Molly pushed him away from the edge of the cliff. It's hot out here, or is it me? Said the dog, sounding all sorts of woozy. Why are all the trees spinning like that, and how come the ground feels wobbly and spongy, like we're on a trampoline? Take it easy, said Molly. You're bleeding really bad. Oscar limped forward. I told you, it's just a His knees buckled. He collapsed and toppled to the ground. Oscar, said Molly, are you okay? Oscar. He didn't answer. He just lay there in the dirt, bleeding. Molly knew what she had to do. She had to run, and fast. Chapter 36. Oscar shivered even though he was burning up with fever. He wished he could take off his fur coat, but he was a dog. The heavy coat was permanently attached. He felt dizzy. If he weren't already lying on the ground, he'd probably collapse. Again. There was a throbbing pain in the side of his chest, right where the weasel boar had nicked him with its tusk. The bloody line had turned into a scabby scar coated with little flakes of leaves. Not exactly a sterile dressing, but rolling over and letting Mother Nature cake the wound had actually stopped the bleeding. Molly, he cried weakly. Molly? The cat didn't answer. Oscar raised his hand slightly and looked around. The cat was gone. She'd probably taken off 2 seconds after Oscar hit the ground. I saved her, he muttered. She abandoned me. Typical cat. All they care about is themselves. His head fell back to the ground with a heavy thud. Ugh. Now Oscar had a splitting headache to go with his throbbing chest ache and his raging fever. And he was alone, in the wilderness at night. He could hear mountain lions off in the distance, howling wolves and coyotes too. Flat on his back, Oscar looked up at the stars and realized this was going to be his last night on Earth. He was going to die, in the middle of nowhere, with no one around. Goodbye, Mom, he whimpered. I'm sorry I ran off like that. It wasn't because of your picnic food. I'm just a runner, I guess. Goodbye, Dad. I hope you never find out that I spent the last few days of my life with a cat. I know how mad that would make you. I thought she was different, you know. Turns out she was just like all the other cats. Then the going got tough. She ran off and left me. Goodbye, Fifi. You can have all my toys. Try not to break all the squeakers out at once. He wheezed. It felt like a St. Bernard was sitting on his chest. You can have my stash of jerky strips, too. Look under the pillow in my dog bed. He had to stop talking to himself. Breathing was getting harder and harder. The walls of his chest felt like they were on fire. Oscar closed his eyes and breathed a sigh. There was nothing to do now except... He heard something approaching. He knew he was a goner. An easy target sprawled out in the clearing, spotlighted in the moon. Who was sneaking up on to eat him? The dead weasel boar's angry cousins or the mountain lions? Maybe it'd be somebody new, like a crazy coyote. He worked open one weakened eye to see who it was, who the attacker was going to be, and saw a cat with white fur and brilliant blue eyes, staring straight down at him. Molly, he murmured. Shh, he said. Don't talk. Did you miss me? No, not exactly. Maybe a little. Oscar grinned as best he could. Kinda, sorta. Thank you, he said. You're kind of a sorta welcome. Now be quiet and stay still. You're a mess. I have major work to do. So we're going to stop there and pick up at chapter 37. Is he going to survive the boar attack? We will find out.